Week 11 already somehow nearly in the books. What's going on, NFL fans? This is your All NFL Now Monday Huddle here on the All-City Network. Adam Hoge joined by Zach Berman, who's joining us from Philly today, PHLY. Of course, I'm in Chicago with CHGO. Got a lot to talk about. Zach, thanks for joining the show today.
Great to be here. Always love talking NFL, especially on Mondays.
Yeah, and there's a lot to talk about. So a lot of good games, a lot of good matchups yesterday, some rivalries, and still a decent game tonight too. And we're going to talk about it all. We have Jesse Holley, who's going to join us, former Cowboy, a little bit later on the show to talk about what's going on tonight between the Cowboys and Texans. We'll also have our guy, RK, Ryan Koenigsberg, join us from DNVR to talk about these Broncos and Bo Nix, which has been a great story this season as well, what Sean Payton's doing. So we got a lot to get to. Appreciate you guys being here on this Monday. We like to start the show, though, by talking about our best and worst from Sunday. Zach, I'll let you have the honors here. What was the best and worst thing you saw yesterday as you enjoyed a Sunday slate of football with the Eagles playing on Thursday?
Yeah, the best and worst I saw happen on the same field, and that was the Detroit Lions. What the Detroit and, of course, the worst being the Jacksonville Jaguars. What Detroit was able to do offensively, especially coming off that win over Houston. That wasn't the best game for them offensively, but for them to score on every drive to start the game, 7 straight touchdowns, for Jared Goff to throw the ball all over the place, the most yards in Detroit Lions history, and really coming off the Eagles win on Thursday night when the Eagles advanced to 8-2, threatened the Lions in terms of the division standings the conference standings. For the Lions to play like that and authoritatively show that they're the best team in the NFC, that was a major statement. And then the inverse being Jacksonville, a putrid effort. It came out before the game that Doug Peterson essentially coaching for his job. And for the Jags to look like that, they barely advanced past midfield throughout much of the game. They had nothing. They had no answers defensively, couldn't keep pace offensively at all. And given all that was going on with that team, given the state of that roster, that was an uninspiring performance to say the least.
Yeah, I'm a little surprised we haven't had the Doug Peterson fired news this morning so far as we actually move into the afternoon here. All right, I'm going to go a little bit more specific in terms of the best and worst of what I saw yesterday. A game we're not going to spend too much time talking about, but it still definitely needs to be shouted out. How about Taysom Hill? 138 rushing yards, 3 touchdowns, and also caught a bunch of passes for 50 receiving yards too. I mean, that's an unbelievable game from Taysom Hill, who seems to have these just random 1 to 2 games every season for feels like a while now. But yeah, watching that yesterday, 138 rushing yards and 3 touchdowns, just taking over what was a close game against the Browns for a while. The Saints are now 2-0 under interim head coach Darren Rizzi and moved to 4-7. And then my worst was a very specific moment, but it was an interesting move by Mike Tomlin at the end of the game to bring in Justin Fields to help run out the clock, with Russell Wilson, playing pretty much the whole game. He's been the starter now for a while, been playing pretty well, but they bring in Fields basically to do what he does best, run the ball. That's not my worst. That actually paid off. but Justin Fields slid before he got the first down. He slid a yard before the first down, and it nearly cost them. Luckily, they were still able to get it, and the Steelers held on for an 18-16 win over their division rival, the Baltimore Ravens. All 18 points from the Steelers coming on Chris Boswell field goals yesterday. But I couldn't help but laugh at that a little bit. Good move, paid off, slid before the first down.
And knowing Justin Fields the way you do, did that surprise you? Do you think the lack of situational awareness there was an outlier, or is that part of the way he plays?
No, I think that's part of the way he plays. I don't think that was like consistently a problem, but there were definitely, in fact, one thing he did improve, because I think early on in his career, he would always fail to, he'd run and he'd get to that first down marker and he wouldn't always stick the ball out to get the first down. And then he did improve that. But, obviously with the way the rules are now, the quarterback sliding, they take you back to the point you start sliding. Yeah. So if you're going to slide, and by the way, his slides were always something I was always on because he never protected himself well when he slid. This was not a situation though where he took a hit. He just slid too early. So nearly cost him. And it's like, if that's what they're putting you in the game for, make sure you get the first down. Just thought that was interesting. Hey, Zach, I want to get your reaction, too, off the top of the show to sort of the news of the morning. And that was Daniel Jones getting benched in New York, division that you cover in the NFC East. I don't think anybody was really surprised by this, but boy, it's a messy situation up there right now.
Yeah, not surprised by the news. Frankly, this is an organizational failure by the Giants. I think this goes back to the 2022 season where I think they overreacted to or overinflated his performance, rather. I mean, he was solid but not spectacular. I didn't think he did enough there to definitively earn the starting job. For them to give him the contract extension, essentially tying themselves into him for 2 additional seasons, at least 2 additional seasons. I thought that was a mistake at the time. You saw that they franchise tagged Saquon Barkley and gave Jones the extension. I would have tried to do the inverse there, or the opposite there. I would have tried to extend Saquon in their situation, tag Daniel Jones to try to buy one more year of Daniel Jones. He got hurt last year. And really, you think about the way teams approach the quarterback situation. They had 2 years here to address quarterback, and instead they were attached to an idea of Daniel Jones from a 15 touchdown, 7 interception season in 2022. He was 9-6-1 as a starter that year. So I think this mistake goes back to 2022 and not necessarily just the way Jones played this year.
Yeah, 100%. We're in agreement there. I mean, the extension never made sense to me. I realized it was a tough situation because today's NFL, you want to pay the quarterback, you don't want to pay the running back. But in this specific case, we're talking about a special running back in Saquon Barkley. And, I remember saying this at the time, I felt like with the importance of the quarterback, and you wanted to see a little bit more from Daniel Jones. Fine. So there's a couple different options that you could have done. You could have franchise tagged Daniel Jones and risk losing Barkley, or what always made sense to me was tagging Barkley and risking losing Daniel Jones. Like, it didn't seem like it was the end of the world if you lost Daniel Jones, because he has just not done enough. That there's such a rush to pay these quarterbacks, Zach, and I keep saying, like, yeah, but the worst place to be in is having paid a quarterback that's not living up to it. And that's exactly what the situation the Giants found themselves in really quickly after that signing.
You're absolutely right. And it looked like they took themselves out of the quarterback market for essentially 2 draft cycles. I know they were interested last year in trading up for Jaden Daniels. Didn't happen. But even this past year, the reason why they couldn't close the deal on Russell Wilson was because of the presence of Daniel Jones. You go back 2 years ago, what they could have done in the quarterback market. You hit it on the head. Had they exposed Daniel Jones to free agency, who exactly were they bidding against? And who was going to give Daniel Jones that contract? And I think that I'm all for paying A quarterbacks A money. I'm not in favor of paying C quarterbacks B money or B quarterbacks A money. And I think that's the mistake they found themselves in with Daniel Jones.
And just to kind of point out, who knows what if it would have been the same situation, nobody could possibly know that. But, we just spent a whole season here in Chicago last year talking about the prospect of losing Justin Fields, and it was this huge debate. And at the end of the day, no one really wanted Justin Fields. They didn't get a lot back. It was a conditional 6 for the Steelers to just make him the backup. So to your point about like who they would have been bidding against when it came to Daniel Jones, like they may have found out there that there wasn't much, and maybe you could have kept him on the cheap. So we'll never know, but it was honestly a regime-defining decision by Joe Schoen, Brian Daboll, and man, sitting there now. What are they, 2-8 now in the bye? It's going to be. It's I don't know. I wouldn't feel comfortable if I were them. And the one thing I can't get over, as we'll move on from the Giants here, but if you watched Hard Knocks and you saw that scene where John Mara comes in to Joe Schoen's office and was like pretty strongly, as strong as he probably could without just totally meddling, even though it still kind of was meddling, was like, yeah, I'm really not going to be happy if we lose Saquon. Right there, if I'm Joe Schoen, I'm probably like, I should probably bump up the offer here a little bit just to make sure that doesn't happen. Sure. And now the optics of it, you're now covering Saquon Barkley in Philly. It just looks horrible for the Giants.
You're absolutely right. And Saquon is a legitimate MVP candidate. Now, I would say that given the stage that the Giants were in this past offseason, it probably wouldn't have made sense for them to pay Saquon top of the market money. But this goes back to knowing where you are as a franchise. If you had just made the playoffs coming off the 2022 season and Saquon was the catalyst there and Daniel Jones was kind of the game manager type, I think they bet on the wrong horse then. Then you look last season. If you're not going to keep Saquon Barkley, you should trade him midseason as opposed to having this protracted contract squabble, the drama surrounding it. You heard Joe Schoen say on Hard Knocks it took years off his life. I think that they handled the entire situation poorly. I don't think that teams that are in the bottom of the league, Frank, we should be paying top money for a running back. I think Saquon and Derrick Henry and Josh Jacobs, they're difference makers on top of the league teams. But the problem with the Giants all along is they've had misguided sense of where they are as a franchise.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll move on. I want to talk about more of these the games that were going on yesterday. I thought the biggest game of the day being the Chiefs and Bills. Zach, I was kind of I understood why a lot of people thought that this would be the week that the Chiefs' undefeated run came to an end. It made a lot of sense with the way the Bills were playing. I ultimately picked the Chiefs in this game sort of just because they figure out a way to pull these games out. And even, into the fourth quarter, it seemed like they would. But at the end of the day, Josh Allen was just too good. It took over a big rushing touchdown to end the game. Holmes kind of continued some of his struggles, especially in the first quarter. He threw an interception on the second play of the game in this one. So, credit to Josh Allen. I think credit to this Bills team, which has now won 6 games in a row. It seemed like they lost a lot in the offseason. They kind of had to reset their roster a little bit. But at the same time, I think they felt like a lot of what they were doing was sort of addition by subtraction. And that led to a little bit of a slow start to start the year. But they brought in reinforcements at the wide receiver position. They put together 6 wins in a row. And now my question to you is, I mean, if they had lost this game yesterday, I think having any chance of getting the one seed would have been out the window, but they win it. And now they're right there within reach. Do you think that there is a world in which the Bills can get the 1 seed in the AFC?
It's certainly conceivable. Now, that Bills schedule includes the 49ers. It includes the Lions. It includes the Rams. So there are games on there where it's potential stumbling blocks, particularly, obviously, the Lions. And they need to pick up a game on the Chiefs. Now, that said, the Chiefs have been narrowly getting by some of these games, and they still have the Chargers, the Texans, the Steelers, the Broncos. I'm big on point differential. The Bills are plus 106 in point differential. That jumps out to me. The thing about this is I view the NFC differently. I think the 1 seed is not as important for the Chiefs. And the reason I say that is we've seen they can turn it on. They're a flip the switch team. They went into Buffalo last year and won. They went into Baltimore last year and won. So they're the kind of team where it's kind of like, the Golden State Warriors sometimes, where, all right, let's just fast forward to the playoffs, because they can win high leverage games on the road in the postseason. But I certainly think it's conceivable if the Chiefs stumble in that division, because that's a much better division of course, the AFC West than the AFC East. And if the only game that the Bills lose is to the Lions, I think they can run the table the rest of the way. So that 49ers game is the real critical one on their schedule.
Yeah, and that game against the Lions on December 15th too just seems like one of those marquee matchups that will be really fun to watch too. Well, regardless, the Bills took care of business going into their bye week. They had to get that one yesterday against the Chiefs, and they did. Let's talk about another team though in the AFC West that benefited from the Chiefs losing and also taking care of business last night in the Sunday night game. Fun game, wild game. Looked like it was headed to be a blowout. Chargers were playing really, really well. The Bengals came all the way back. They probably win that game if they could, make a field goal, which they just could not late. And then the Chargers got in position to make their own field goal. And instead of settling for it like the Bears did in their game, which we'll get to here in a little bit, Jim Harbaugh keeps trying to run the ball, turns into a J.K. Dobbins 29-yard touchdown run, and the Chargers improved to 7-3, which, is a testament, I think, to what Jim Harbaugh does. I mean, Jim Harbaugh, like him or love him, man, he wins football games. And I'm not surprised at all to see him get this team off to, I don't know, maybe I wouldn't have said 7-3, but I'm not surprised to see them having success, Zach.
You're absolutely right. And I think this is you hit it on the head, that this is what Jim Harbaugh does. And I understand that Chargers job was attractive last year, but there must be teams around the NFL, I would imagine Chicago included, that should be kicking themselves right now. That you have an elite NFL coach who was available last year, and he's the kind of coach who I think you move mountains to get, because all he's done everywhere he's been, from the University of San Diego to Stanford to the San Francisco 49ers to the University of Michigan and now quickly at the Chargers, is win. And maybe he wears out his welcome over a period of time, but that Chargers team, the way they're playing now compared to last year when Brandon Staley was there, it's the personnel is different, but not overwhelmingly different. The high profile players are still the same high profile players, and they're winning games. And they're winning games because of the culture that Jim Harbaugh's created. It's not surprising to me, and I don't think that's a team that I don't think anyone in the AFC is going to want to see in the postseason, because they're well coached. They have a high level quarterback, and they can win these tough games.
Yeah, 100%. And I think we'll continue to see how they got a tough one coming up against the Ravens next week. I think that's on Monday night. They go to Falcons, Chiefs. It's going to be a tough road here for the Chargers, but seeing them take care of. It's been a soft schedule lately, right? They went Saints, Browns, Titans, but that was still a good win over the Bengals last night, and a good job surviving. So, when it comes to Jim Harbaugh, like you said, maybe he's not going to be around forever. I know we have this discussion in Chicago.
Yeah.
It's even come up with Belichick here, right? Because Belichick's probably going to take a job, and it's like, oh, well, he's old, and like, how long are you really going to have him? I don't know, man. 4 to 5 years, that's longer than Bears coaches last year anyway. I mean, you get so concerned about wanting to hire a guy for 10 years that you hire the wrong guy, and you end up having to fire them after a couple of years anyway. And it seems to be the same road the Bears are down now. So when it came to Harbaugh, I'll take 4 good years of Jim Harbaugh. I'll take 4 good years of Bill Belichick. I'd rather have a guy that I know can coach, even if it's going to be for a short amount of time. The way things are going here in Chicago, Zach, it's still probably going to be more time than whatever the next coach is they have to hire and fire.
Is it revisionist history to say this is something that the Bears should have looked at last year, given the fact that you have someone who knows Chicago, he won in Chicago as a player, he knows the Midwest. You had the number 1 pick in the draft, so it's a situation where there's already a sense of renewal. I understand there was a little momentum at the end of last year with Eberflus, but is it revisionist history to say when a coaching candidate like Jim Harbaugh's out there and you have the number 1 pick, they should have explored it more?
Well, it's not revisionist history because it's what everyone here was talking about at the time. Like, there were a lot of people, and it was not a black and white, like cut and dry, obvious move to make because, the Eberflus thing, they did finish, like they were making progress at the end of last season, but so many people, we talked about it on our show, CHGO Bears, almost daily. Like, the Bears keep getting stuck in this cycle where they're not all aligned from top to bottom down to the quarterback, and they were going to have a new quarterback, and everybody knew that, and yet the whole thing was going to be backwards again. And that's where they find themselves now is what it looks like. And this is where we can kind of transition this conversation to the Bears because, for one, to kind of wrap up the Harbaugh thing, everybody kind of looks at it now, Zach, like, well, it was never going to work. The Bears were never going to hire like an alpha type like that. And even Jim Harbaugh probably wanted a veteran quarterback more than he wanted to start over with Caleb Williams. That's all fine, but that's kind of the point. That's kind of the problem, is that just being like throwing your hands up and being like, that's just not what the Bears do. That's just not how, they kind of do. Well, that's kind of the problem here, right? Like, no, go out and do something like that. Hire the alpha. If he's got concerns about coaching a rookie quarterback, we'll convince him with money, with whatever you need to convince him with, that coming back to Chicago where he played is a good idea. Instead, they just sort of punt, just like they did on 4th down with 4 minutes to go in the game yesterday. Just punt, and it's just the Bears' way instead of being aggressive. And then, Jim Harbaugh is at the end of the game. He's not settling for a field goal. He's still running the ball, okay? And then bringing it back to the Hail Mary a few weeks ago, he calls timeout before the Bengals are about to throw a Hail Mary. So all these things that Matt Eberflus has failed to do here in the last 4 weeks, Jim Harbaugh did it to a T at the end of the game, and that just kind of spiked this whole conversation last night locally here in Chicago. Meanwhile, a little bit of news on that blocked field goal that obviously the Bears gave up to lose to the Packers, their division rival, 11th straight loss to Matt LaFleur and the Green Bay Packers. Matt Eberflus he just wrapped up his press conference at House Hall and said they are actually going to be turning in that play to the league because it looked like on film that the Packers hit the long snapper while his head was down. That's technically a penalty. Whatever, Zach. The left guard didn't get out of his stance. The pressure came through the A gap. They blocked it fair and square, in my opinion, just because there's, a safety rule on the long snapper. That's not why you lost the game.
I'll defer to you on all matters, both Bears and special teams. I will trust your judgment there. I also look at this, though. It's similar to me as the Daniel Jones conversation in that you have to be self-aware about where you are as an organization, about who your people are. I think that teams can convince themselves on coaches, convince themselves on quarterbacks, and you don't want to be in that situation. It seems trite to say it, but if you don't know, you already know. And so if you don't have utter conviction of your coach, if you go into a year where it's like, well, we'll see, I think that's problematic. And I think back, by the way, when the Eagles fired Doug Peterson, and this is a Super Bowl winning coach who went to the playoffs 3 consecutive years. He had a bad year in 2020. And I remember Eagles owner Jeffrey Lurie saying it's not a matter of deserve. It's not that he deserves to be fired, but it's that for where they needed to go as an organization, Jeffrey felt that at that time, the Eagles needed to take a step back and to rebuild, and that if Doug Peterson was going into a make or break year, he would be coaching, trying to and make decisions, trying to capitalize on that year. And I think that's kind of where the Bills were last year with Eberflus, is that this seemed to be, at least from the outside, and I'll defer to you and your colleagues in Chicago, a make or break year for Eberflus. And I think when you're in that situation, it just made sense for me to click the reset button. You already were bringing in a new offensive coordinator, to have the complete alignment from the top down, not to have a situation where Matt Eberflus needed to win to keep his job, but to have a coach, a coordinator, and a quarterback, and a front office in alignment altogether. And I think that whether that would have been making more of an institutional commitment to hiring Cliff Kingsbury as the OC, or bringing in a new head coach altogether, I think the Bears mismanaged that situation because they had a chance to start anew.
Well, and that's the difference between what good franchises do and bad franchises, because I remember when the Eagles made that move being kind of surprised, from the outside. It seemed like it was a little reactionary to, one bad year. Well, in reality, as you just explained very well, Zach, they were getting out ahead of it. They were getting a year ahead, maybe, than what the Bears do, which is always they make moves too late. Like even firing Shane Waldron was a week too late, because if they had done it a week before, everything you saw offensively that started to work yesterday with Thomas Brown, the new OC, Caleb Williams, that's the silver lining. Yesterday, as bad of a loss as it is, Caleb played a lot better. He looked great. Honestly, he's probably the best player on the field. But all that could have been a week ago, and you would have probably easily beaten a bad Patriots team. Instead, you scored 3 points and got embarrassed. So everything was a week late. Everything's a year late. Like it always, they did this in 2021 when they decided to bring Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy back for one more year. And it was a disaster. And it was the same thing. They let them go trade up for a quarterback in the draft, even though they were basically in a lame duck situation. So this is just what the Bears do. They're always too late. It appears that they are again here. And all everybody's doing is kind of crossing their fingers and hoping that this Caleb Williams thing, that he's the savior, because in this league, if you have a quarterback, it can work out. Now, quickly, before we bring in Arcade to talk about Bo Nix, I want to stay in the NFC North real quick because this has to do with the Eagles too. The Detroit Lions are rolling right now. Everybody else in this division won yesterday. The Vikings won. Obviously, the Packers beat the Bears, so they won. With the Lions rolling, though, my question to you is, with where the Eagles are at and getting their win over the Commanders on Thursday, how do you see the top of this NFC playing out the rest of the way?
The fascinating part to me is, unlike the AFC, I think the number one seed matters so much more here. And the reason I say that, and you can attest to it, is Detroit is built to be in a dome. They play 14 of their 17 games this year in a dome. They're such an outstanding team, but that's a place. So if you're the Eagles, you don't want to have to travel to Detroit in late January in a raucous Ford Field. The inverse, though, is that if the Eagles were to get the number one seed, I think they would have a major advantage bringing Jared Goff and Detroit into Philly into late January, outside in a tough environment. So I think that this is going to be a race down to the wire. I think the Lions are the better team. I think I think you're seeing the benefit of continuity with that coaching staff, the synergy that Jared Goff has with him. That said, I think there's more upside for the Eagles. And the reason I say that is they're 8-2 without their offense clicking. They were 8-2 with AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, and Jalen Hurts still haven't hit their ceiling in the passing game. Whereas Detroit, as well as they're playing, Aiden Hutchinson, perhaps their best player out, or I would say one of their two best players. He's out here. They just lost one of their top linebackers. So I think they're dealing with more injuries. I would take the Lions in a neutral field game, but I think that's going to come down to who's the number one seed.
Makes a lot of sense. I mean, to me, the Lions look like the better team on paper right now. I see where you're coming from on, perhaps the Eagles ceiling. And certainly, I trust Vic Fangio, and defensively that's going to help them. I also feel like with the Eagles, though, there's more things that could potentially go wrong. than with what the Lions are doing right now. And I 100% agree with you that if Detroit's able to get home field advantage all the way through the NFC, that would be a huge boost for them. Because I would definitely look at that game differently if they go to Philly. So a lot on the line there as those teams continue to battle. But the Lions have been that's another thing about the Lions. They're just fun to watch. And for so many years, they were not fun to watch. It'll be interesting to see how that continues to play out in the NFC North as they look really, really good. All right, we are going to talk Broncos next with our guy RK. But first, I got to tell you about Game Time, because this week's episode of All NFL Monday Huddle is presented by our friends at Game Time. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. If you haven't used Game Time before, check it out, because they filter out all the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. You know how frustrating that can be. They also give you all-in pricing. You toggle that feature on. You don't have to worry about all the fees that comes with buying tickets. They'll give you the total upfront, which is always very helpful. They'll show you panoramic views from your seats in the app before you buy. And they have the lowest price guarantee on Game Time. They will credit you up to 110% of the difference. So take the guesswork out of buying NFL tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code ALLNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code ALLNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guarantee. All right, well, good stories around the NFL right now is what's going on in Denver. Sean Payton, Bo Nix, an unlikely pairing that is paying off. It's time to bring in our guy, RK. You can follow him on Twitter at Ryan Koenigsberg. Man, I don't know if I need to apologize to you or what, but this is working out right now. I don't know what to say. I mean, and Bo Nix is making some legitimate throws along the way too. It's not just like it's all just schemed up. And I mean, it is, and Sean Payton's doing a really good job, but he's also making some really good throws along the way. And the Broncos are, after facing a tough 2-week stretch in the schedule, boy, did they bounce back yesterday with a huge win over the Falcons.
Yeah, I heard you guys wanted to talk about the future NFL Offensive Rookie of the Year, so here I am to talk about Bo Nix.
Is it possible? Like, for real though, it's that gap is a lot smaller than I think people realize with Jaden Daniels.
Yeah, what's crazy is I got in on it at plus 800 before this week, and it's already down to plus 300. Now, Jaden Daniels is minus 400, so he's still got a pretty healthy lead there, but the gap is closing quickly. And if Bo puts out performances like he had yesterday consistently moving forward, I mean, the Broncos are going to make the playoffs, and that conversation is going to get really, really interesting. So yesterday, he's the first, this is from our friend James Palmer, first rookie ever to complete over 80% of his passes and throw for over 300 yards and 4 TDs in a game. First rookie ever to do that. It was his fourth game with 70% completion or better, 2 pass touchdowns, and 0 interceptions this season, which is most ever by a rookie, tied for with Dak Prescott. And it's just remarkable to see the progression that he's made. That's what I tweeted during the game, is like, these narratives and these awards usually get decided early because people decide who they're going to watch and who they're not going to. And if you just watched Bo Nix the first 2 weeks of the season, you'd say, okay, well, I don't need to watch him anymore. But the progression that he's made from then to now is really, really rare and special. And I think not enough credit probably is being given to Sean Payton for that. He is doing just a world-class job of getting Bo prepared and getting him ready. And that game plan yesterday was just off the charts good. I usually talk about how, you guys have heard of the, whatever you want to call it, the 60-20-20 rule. It's like 60% of games are going to be close, 20 or you're going to play above what you're capable of, 20% you're going to play below what you're capable of. And that was very clearly a high 20% game. And that usually has to do with the game plan. And I mean, it felt like every single button Sean Payton pressed in that game hit perfectly. And it's rare that you see that, just one after another, dialing up plays. And then even in the times when he didn't dial it up great, Bo was able to make a play. And it's, I mean, if you were to watch week 1 or week 2 tape and then compare it to what Bo Nix did yesterday, you would think one of those was from a guy 10 years ago, and one was, at towards the end of his career when he was completely locked in. For them to be able to develop him that quickly and that aggressively in just, 8 weeks time really is just unbelievable to watch.
So let's build on that, because I saw that game against the Jets when he was 12 of 25 for 60 yards. And I remember thinking, oh man, they bet on the wrong horse here. No pun intended, right? And the interesting thing too is the whole thing with Bo Nix is he was supposed to be more pro ready. He was a 24-year-old, 5-year guy in college, right? What have they done, whether it's behind the scenes or with the game plan, to get him from where he was week 4 to where he is now, where he's playing better than any rookie quarterback in the NFL?
I mean, a lot of it is giving him easy stuff and giving him kind of confidence builders. But I think that also just goes to his confidence going up. The throw that he made to Devon Vele in the, up the middle of the field on a post, over the linebacker in front of the safety, it was just like, no one knew he was capable of making that throw earlier in the season because he didn't have the confidence to make it. But now we're seeing that when he wants to just step in and fire it, he does have that arm. He does have the ability to fit the ball into tight windows, and it's, I think, a combination of confidence, a combination of scheme, and then there's just something too. The old, like, the game slowing down for you thing. Like, it's very clear that when he was in college, he was processing the game at an elite level. Then you get to the NFL, and it's just like you're in a whole new world. And I don't blame anyone, and including myself. I guess I don't blame myself, but for being worried. Okay, well, maybe that processor isn't quite as fast as it looked when he was at Oregon. But I think it was clearly just a scenario where he needed to feel it. He needed to get used to it. And now that he's understands the speed of the game, I think he can process at that rate.
So, I mean, these numbers are impressive. Only 5 incompletions, 28 out of 33, 307 yards, 4 touchdowns. Broncos are now 6-5. What's the ceiling for this team right now, RK?
I mean, I think the ceiling is making the playoffs. Once you get into the dance, anything can happen. But I think that there's nothing stopping them from getting there. The schedule for the next few weeks plays out pretty nicely. You've got a few more winnable games, and then I think as the end of the season comes, you got a Chargers matchup, you got a Chiefs matchup that are really going to test you, and see if you're kind of ready for that. Obviously, the Broncos showed they were ready for the Chiefs last week, but I think that this team can absolutely make the playoffs. And just to go back to one more piece of credit for Sean Payton that I think he deserves is, not a lot of people right now, at least, are talking about the lack of weapons that Bo Nix has around him. Like, you talk about going into a great situation for a quarterback, and I think one of the things that was maybe underrated for Bo Nix coming in here was the quality of the offensive line that the Broncos have. Those guys are playing really, really well. But one of the reasons why, the Broncos fans are pulling receipts left and right now of people predicting this team to go 3-14 or get the number 1 overall pick, this, that, or the other, was because people were looking and saying, okay, well, who do they have that they can go to? Who's the guy that they can rely on offensively? And obviously you're not going to put a rookie quarterback in that conversation before the season. So it was like, okay, well, Cortland Sutton, he's a okay number 1 wide receiver. What else do they have on offense? It's not like anyone feared Javonte Williams or Jaleel McLaughlin, or no one even knew who Devon Vele is, rightfully so. So it's like the scheme and just the job that Sean Payton has done to get them in good situations without having, their Jamar Chase or Justin Jefferson, who you can just say, yeah, we know in a moment you can go to this guy anytime you want. It's crazy. It's honestly like crazy even for me to see the way that that Sean Payton has these guys looking like, world beaters in a game like yesterday.
And then on the other side of the ball too, outside of that Ravens game, you look at these past 4 weeks. Falcons scored 6 points. Chiefs only scored 16 on them. Panthers held to 14 points. What are they doing defensively to help Bo Nix?
Yeah, I mean, great point in terms of talking about their ceiling, because this defense feels like they can go toe to toe with anyone right now. Um, I think one of the biggest kind of revelations on that side of the ball has been Riley Moss, playing opposite of Pat Surtain, and it's just like, you already know that one side of the field is going to be completely locked down with number 2 out there. In his career to this point, the Broncos haven't necessarily had a guy on the other side who can lock up as well. And Riley Moss, kind of out of nowhere, comes in and is playing really, really good at cornerback too. And then, of course, once you get that going, then all of the other stuff lines up. And Vance Joseph has been incredibly aggressive, blitzing on pass downs this year. And you can only really get away with that if those guys are covering out there. So those guys are doing a great job in coverage. And then, across the board, but I think most impressively, Nick Benito, who has a really, really, really fast first step. When you put him in speed rushing situations, he's just been teeing off. So it's, to me, it starts with that coverage, and then Vance Joseph trusting that coverage to be really, really aggressive, and it's making life a living hell. And then, of course, they're also just stopping the run. The Bijan Robinson couldn't get anything out there. So all of that adds up to some fun defense.
Can you, I guess, just to make myself feel worse and everybody in Chicago, explain what ownership change and investing in a proven head coach can possibly do for a franchise?
Well, I'll start by saying we loved the former owners, and especially Pat Bowlen before he passed away. It was that, but the Broncos were in like a weird middle ground there for a while, where it was the team was in the hands of the trust, and so you don't really realize how much money helps a franchise, especially because the average person does, well, there's a salary cap, how much can it really help you, until you're in the situation of the Broncos where your owner is like 4 times richer than the next richest owner in the league, and it's just like they came in here and we're just like, we want to win. That's all. Whatever it takes. We're not here to make money. They've got plenty of that. They just want to spend. And so when they targeted Sean Payton, I think when they determined that that's who they wanted, there was no number that was going to stop them, and that's obviously very, very valuable to a team to just be able to go get it. So yeah, I know you guys are looking over at what's going on with the Chargers and Harbaugh and thinking that could have been us, but yeah, it's a underrated advantage. And then, you get even more down into the nitty gritty of like, Broncos probably wouldn't have been able to move on from Russell Wilson if it wasn't for all of the money that they have in the back, just to be able to restructure contracts, pay bonuses out, all of that escrow stuff that, you get into when you get into the nitty gritty of NFL contracts and loopholes with the salary cap. Broncos probably wouldn't have been able to do that if they didn't have, unlimited resources on that side. So it's been nice.
Can I give you one more observation that I don't know if it has to do with that or not? I'm assuming it does. The field looks incredible. Like I thought I was watching the Rose Bowl yesterday. Like for real. Like is that has to be related, right? Like just in terms of just investing in things that make sense. It sounds so simple, but fix your field.
I'm going to clip this and send it to the Broncos because they will be so happy that you said that. Yeah, I mean that is part of it. Last season, going into Week 18, the Broncos field was in bad condition, and the ownership went and spent whatever ridiculous amount of money it is, like $300,000 or something, to replace the field just for one game because they knew they would have to replace it again before this season. But they when people look out there at the field, when they're watching the Denver Broncos play, they want them to say, man, this looks like the Rose Bowl, like you just did. So, yes, that also plays a role. That's going to make some people happy in the Broncos organization.
All right. Well, good stuff, RK. We always love having you on. It's been honestly fun watching that Broncos team play right now. We'll see if they can keep it going, man. Appreciate it.
All right. Good to talk to you, fellas.
All right. One team who will make changes inside their stadium to benefit to another that refuses to put up curtains and drops touchdowns in the end zone because the sun's shining. Jesse Holley joins us now with the Cowboys set to play the Texans. Won't have to worry about it tonight. It's a night game, so there will be no sun. But boy, do the Cowboys, Jesse, need to get back on track. And I don't know how much of a rivalry this is with the Texans, being they're not in the same conference, but I'll set the scene for this game tonight for us.
Yeah, it's the Battle of Texas, right? It's the Highway 45 that separates Dallas, and Houston. And to your point, when the Cowboys, in order to have a rivalry, you have to play more frequently. There has to be a back and forth kind of thing. This is just more bragging rights, right? The people in Houston who, we dubbed the name, the armpit. This is all about bragging rights right here, and the Cowboys aren't sitting in a pretty position right now to be able to feel like they're going to be able to be on the winning side of the bragging rights of this game.
Do Cowboys fans want Dallas to win here? Right. I was there last week. I saw the delta between the Eagles and the Cowboys. If there's Cooper Rush, a quarterback the rest of the way, or even Trey Lance, what's the sentiment overall in Dallas? Do they want them to win, or is it about draft pick watching?
You have a contingency of people who are looking at the draft pick possibilities, but then you have a large majority of the fans that, man, we've lost 4 games in a row. Like, people want to cheer for their football team. People want something to go to work the next day and be happy about, or to get into their group chats or get on social media. So for sure, Cowboy fans want their team to win, but you have a small little contingency of people that was like, no, right now we're at the number 9 draft pick. Let's see if we can get to the top 5 thing. Let's take my co-host, my co-host, the host of our show, Jeff Kavanaugh. He looks at this and he's like, he's like this. I'm Captain Tate, reporting ready for duty, sir. So he wants them to lose because he wants a high draft pick. I'm a former player, so there's nothing in me that ever wants to lose. And I know there's a bunch of guys on that football team who want to win football games.
So, kind of setting this up for tonight with Dak Prescott being out. Help me out with the quarterback situation here a little bit. You got Cooper Rush, who's been there. They're obviously playing him, but I mean, Trey Lance. It feels like whatever might be left in Trey Lance, you'd want to figure that out at some point. Where do you stand on the quarterback situation?
I always laugh when it comes to Trey Lance. Now, don't get me wrong. Cooper Rush is Cooper Rush, and he's a backup for a reason. And you ask any NFL owner or head coach, if you get to your backup, you're pretty much screwed. But I don't understand the fixation with Trey Lance. We've seen what he has. We've seen it in preseason. We've seen it when he was playing with San Francisco. We've seen it when he got in the game against the Cowboys. He's just not a good football player. And I get that he held the number 3 overall pick tag against him, and there's always a second and third and fourth and fifth and sixth and seventh chance for those type of guys. But he's not a good football player. And for Mike McCarthy to be a guy who he has kind of hung his hat on his NFL career on being a quarterback whisperer and having the eye of what a quarterback is. Like, if he was as good as people projected him to be, he would have jumped over, Cooper Rush and been given those particular snaps. But the Cowboys went with the guy who's been here for 7 seasons, and Cooper Rush, and who played the absolute most horrid game that you could ever play a week ago. And they said, we're still going back to him next week. So that, to me, tells you all that you need to know about Trey Lance. A part of how I do feel about it, though, because the Cowboys, how much they don't want to say that there's like some sort of soap opera at times, I'm saying that they're going to wait to play Trey Lance on Thanksgiving so that there's another storyline, there's a little bit of intrigue for the Thanksgiving game. Of course, we see what the Giants have done with their quarterback, so they're holding on a little bit of hope that maybe for Thanksgiving that they'll march out Trey Lance and that'll give some sort of feeling to the fans that, a new storyline and maybe the Trey Lance era may begin.
Now, typically when if there's a backup quarterback, you can hang your hat on the running game. They don't run the ball particularly well. You can hang your hat on the defense. They're struggling on defense. What is the recipe right now for Dallas?
Brandon Aubrey. I mean, Brandon Aubrey. I think there's, of course, Brandon Aubrey's been a bright spot, and I know that's laughable. Like that's the first thing out of my mouth, right? It's the kicker. Most people won't say the kicker is the bright spot of their football team, but you get Micah Parsons back, and with Houston, their offensive line hasn't been that very good this season. So maybe Micah Parsons be able to create some havoc off the edge. But I will say, if you're looking for something to kind of hold on to right now and maybe the future, it's the Mario Overshown. This kid has found himself in conversations of being a really good football player. I had an interesting moment with Mario Overshown in the lunchroom a couple of days ago. I do some work over in the Cowboys building as well. And I have been saying for weeks now that DeMario Overshown loved the aggressiveness, loved the speed, loved the intensity, loved the veracity. Just break down, young fella. Just break down, see what you're hitting, make the tackle, right? He had the moment, the folly last week where he misses Saquon and knocks over Eric Kendricks, and then he has Jalen Hurts dead to rights for a sack. Doesn't see what he's hitting, doesn't break down. Jalen Hurts sidesteps and throws the touchdown pass in the second half of that game. So as I'm standing in the lunchroom at the Star getting my lunch, up behind me I hear a voice that goes, "You're right. I need to break down." And I turn around and I look, and it's DeMario Overshown. And I didn't think he knew who I was. I didn't think he knew what I was saying. I didn't think he read my tweets. But I have to remember the day and time that we live in and the rabbit ears that all these players have nowadays. And I turned around and I looked. We smiled. We bro hugged. And I said, "Man, you're a hell of a player." He goes, "Nah, you're right, man. You're right. I got to break down, man. I got to break down." He goes, "Watch. You just watch, man. I'm going to break down. I'm going to break down." I said, everything doesn't have to be a hit stick. A tackle is a tackle is a tackle is a tackle. Just make the tackle, and then when you have your moments to knock somebody out, you knock them out. But see what you're hitting. He's like, "You're right, you're right, you're right, big bro, you're right, big bro." And like I said, he walked off smiling, I walked off smiling with my chicken wings and pizza, and we had a great day.
That's a great story. I love hearing interactions like that, and it doesn't always have to be personal. Everyone getting upset.
Yeah,
that was good stuff. All right, man. Jesse, we'll be watching tonight. We'll see if the Cowboys can hang in there and squeak out a win. The Texans got to have it. So we'll be watching. We got DLLS tonight, and we'll be following you on Twitter too at Mr. Fourth and Long. Appreciate it, man.
Thank you, guys, man. Have a good one.
All right, there he is, Jesse Holley from DLLS. Zach, we'll wrap up here. I know you got your PHLY Eagles show coming up in about 8 minutes. So everybody watching in Philly that wants to just slide on over there and watch that show. Same thing going on in Chicago for our Bears fans. We got CHGO Bears coming up in a few minutes as well. So make sure you are checking those out. Any final thoughts, though, as we wrap up Week 11, or any thoughts on the game tonight?
Yeah, the game tonight, I mean, I give Houston the clear advantage. I think that Dallas, given the state of that roster, could certainly benefit from a higher draft pick and higher draft picks overall. They're a team that tends to draft well. They shouldn't have made that trade for Mingo a few weeks ago. So that's my feeling overall. And then I'm just fascinated to sum this all up by the AFC West race in particular. I think there are 3 teams there that are legitimate playoff contenders, of course, and then what happens at the top of the NFC, because that the race for the number 1 seed, and we'll be talking about that today on the PHLY Eagles show. I think that's going to determine who goes to the Super Bowl.
Absolutely. And I was looking at it when RK was on with us too. There's kind of to me, a significant separation on the AFC side in terms of the last playoff spot. Like Denver's in there right now as the 7th seed. Indy's 5 and 6, but I don't know. I don't really take them that seriously. Miami's interesting now that they got Tua back, and certainly that offense looks to be back. They're 4 and 6, so I don't think we can quite rule them out. And as much as the Bengals still seem like they're battling and are tough out every single week, they're 4 and 7. So at some point, that's going to be tough. And then the list ends there because the next team is the Jets, and the Jets are horrible. And nothing's going right with Aaron Rodgers. So the door to me is open for the Broncos to be the 7th seed and get in there. So we'll have to continue to watch that one pretty closely. I, like you, am very intrigued in this Lions and Eagles battle in the NFC. We'll see how that plays out as well. And appreciate everybody watching this week. Week 11 it's always fun how fast the season goes by, and we're still getting into the best part of it too. That's the best thing. We're getting to Thanksgiving, holidays, a lot of good games, and the competition ramps up a little bit as well. You can watch Zach on PHLY. Again, their show's coming up here in a few minutes. You can follow him on Twitter at ZBerm, and he does a great job with everything he writes, which you should be reading allphly.com as well. Zach, appreciate it this week, man. And enjoy the show, enjoy the week. For everyone else, we'll be back next Monday as well. Bo Brack will be joining me next week, as we will already be deep into week 12, and we'll recap everything next Monday, as we always do here on the All NFL Monday Huddle.
We all silly like the mayor.